So before I go into what they're talking about, I want to go over something that's really important. As they're trying to predict what I'm going to do or say and they get it wrong, they said when I'm on the camera, I just kind of naturally speak, which means this wasn't always happening to me. I noticed that a lot when they're talking in the background, my speech changes or what I'm about to say is like I don't finish my sentences or the words change and I have to go back. And I said that in an earlier video. I hope I can find it. I may not be able to, but I mentioned that this was years, not last year, which was 2004, probably not, it probably was in 2023 or 2022. I said with them talking, what I'm about to say kind of goes off and it sounds like they're trying to make me look insane. But since it's out loud and other people can hear it, clearly it's not my brain. So, they just said something again, but what I want to talk about before I go into what they're talking about is if someone's talking in the background while you're talking, and I used to do this. I used to do this in my videos where I'm like, it's like this. I'm talking to you and they're talking at the same time, and it causes me to be confused, lose my train of thought. But it's also a way of making someone look like they have a medical illness. Oh, excuse me. A medical, yes, there is a medical condition that involves that, but also a mental illness. So I'm kind of going back and forth between was this supposed to make my medical issues look worse? Or was it supposed to make me look like I'm having some sort of a mental illness? So, what I'm going to talk about right now is that if I'm speaking to someone and they're speaking to me also, I would never have been able to work. And I've said this in previous videos. My job involved being an effective communicator. So, one of their ways of trying to hurt me and destroy me was to make it seem like I was an ineffective communicator. But according to things that I've shown you from my previous employers, you know that can't be true. Also, they said something just now, I can't hear them. Also, it couldn't be true because part of what they were trying to do in the very beginning, and I've said this now since at least 2021, 2022. So I'm showing you that there is something in them that has been consistent. They wanted to take credit for my work. So they have consistently wanted to take credit for my work. But what is changing recently is now they're becoming more, they said hateful. That was the word they just said. More critical and more irrational. So I'll go now into what we've been talking about, which is being irrational. But what I'm saying about that is that if they've been consistent on some things, but become more critical and irrational about other things, something's going wrong. I probably think it's a combination of them destroying themselves. They said they added too many other people. That's what they just said. But I think it's something worse. I think the conditions that they tried to give me, I said the medical and mental, were mental illnesses more than medical. And now that thankfully people see that there's a big connection between the brain, which is medical, and your behavior, which can seem mental, that it's making it a lot easier for me to explain how the conditions that they're trying to give me, if you have a medical condition and then you have irrational thoughts on top of it, it would seem mental. But I believe that if you have a medical condition, you should look at the medical first. So that a lot of this can be attributed not to mental illness, but to medical conditions. They also did something different recently. The criticisms have become more irrational. So not only do we have their irrational worries, which I started with, their irrational thoughts, which I went to, and now I'm on their irrational way of speaking. So they were concerned that I was going to talk about the Hunger Games. So I'm going to stick for this video with talking just about the first Hunger Game movie. And then I will go into, they were talking about, I didn't go over the rest of the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn. I'm really not going to go into that anymore because I'll just put the clip in the description. But I think we covered that, and we covered that in terms of what we're seeing and being able to see what we're going through in a movie. I'm going to go now into the Hunger Games just quickly. And then, I think people we've seen it before, but it's the idea of being able to see something on the screen. And since we're talking about what's irrational, we're not just talking about the whole Hunger Game itself being irrational, but we're talking about something I'm going to talk about in Katniss. Katniss, and there's an article that I read, and I'll link it in the description, has a, an amount of irrationality to her also. That character is somewhat irrational. And I think part of what happened throughout the course of the movie is she becomes more rational as the irrational around her is exposed. So let me just see if I can rephrase it, because I think I confused myself too. The more irrational, the more an irrational person is exposed to irrationality, it makes it a little bit easier for them to see how irrational they can be, but also the rational environment they're in. So once she's in an irrational environment, Katniss becomes more rational, and she becomes more, she realizes what she has to do in this environment. So I'm saying from the beginning, where Katniss seems very irrational and she's just like, she's not understanding, the more she interacts within this irrational environment, she becomes a rational person and does what she has to do to win. So partly what's going on now with this whole situation I'm in, they're becoming less rational. So they were irrational to begin with, but when put in this irrational environment, they're becoming more irrational. They're the opposite of the Katniss character, where in order to survive, they would have to become more rational and say, this doesn't make any sense. They're doing the thing they shouldn't do, become more irrational in an irrational environment, which again is a sign of mental illness. So to me, the Katniss character doesn't display mental illness. She's irrational, but she becomes more rational in this irrational situation. The people doing this to me are doing the opposite. This is an irrational situation. The idea that they could claim that they were giving me ideas that they never had to begin with, and to prove that, they're upset because I found videos from about kids, what we did in the 70s and 80s, and they said that was the opposite of what they thought I experienced, which is irrational, because had they been doing this during that time, they would have known it. But to make themselves more irrational, instead of just admitting that they were wrong, they wanted to come up with a script for how I would, they just said, explain this. I couldn't explain it. You would have to be the one to explain it, because you're the ones giving me the idea. That's the very definition of irrational, expecting the victim to take care of you. And this is what I've been saying when I talk about the Mammy and the Jezebel. They put me back in the Jezebel role yesterday when they talked about a very handsome man who was not interested in me. Listen, I hate to admit this, I've been in New York, 51 years. If this handsome man wanted me, he would have found a better way to get to me than using this system. That's partly what I'm saying about them. The people who they claim aren't attracted to me find ways to find me and express their attraction. Those people, they would say, are not attracted to me. The people who have no interest in me whatsoever, they want me to believe, would use this system to express an interest in me. It's out loud, folks. This is not making any sense. It's irrational. But that would mean I would have to become irrational and believe this. So they said that they used to at night talk to me. And like I said, a big part of this happens when you're sleeping. And they don't seem to understand that it takes your memory. So you don't remember things. So if they're the ones doing it, they would have known that it's been documented that this affects mental illness, memory loss, the exposure to radiation, EMF, radio frequency. It's been documented already that it affects memory loss. You've seen the swelling, the inflammation, memory loss, dementia. The paper that I got from, they just said Montefiore. It wasn't Montefiore, it was Albert Einstein College. They wanted the research study for inflammation, aches and pains, and Alzheimer's. So that's been established already. In their minds, I am so easily discredited that I can't speak on my own behalf because I've been discredited, but were the ones who said they're giving me ideas. So clearly they've been discredited. So that's part of what I'm saying. They're irrational thoughts. I'm able to discredit that person right there by saying you had the wrong information. And instead of them stopping, which would be rational, a rational person would say, I'm saying the wrong thing. Let me stop talking until I get the facts. They will keep talking, which is irrational. It's as though, like I said in previous videos, they're talking to use me as a front for this fraud. I was supposed to come on camera and tell you guys all sorts of lies, and I'm seeing things, and this is what this experience leads to, that when I could not do that because I would not do that, they came up with another fraud, another scam, another scheme, which is why I used to call them the schemy scammies. It's all meant to scare people. And I think what it was meant to do, and they just said this, they said it was meant to blame Black people. I do think that's why they focus so much on me, because there are other people, other victims who aren't Black, who aren't female, who experience this, and they seem to have focused so much on me because if they can't discredit me, then they could use me to draw in other people. So they're really upset, and I've told you this in previous videos. If there are certain comments I won't read, I won't respond to. I've told you that it's a free country. They said that this was supposed to look like it was a job for me. Not if you're slowing down my videos. Had I been getting the right amount of views and comments, and it wasn't comments just from them, meaning for some reason they thought I would just interact with them and not regular people. Had I been getting that, then it would have seemed like, okay, I'm getting a lot of views, I'm getting a lot of comments. That makes more sense. This doesn't feel like a job. This feels more like their way of trying to make me the front of their lies and their fraud and their fear tactics. So part of what I'm doing by telling you they're irrational is I'm no longer afraid of their tactics. Do I fear that they have the ability to kill people? Yes, I do. They admitted that they mentioned a famous singer and they wanted me to link her video. They've been saying this for a long time now. There are other people too, but this one in particular. And something happened to that person. That wasn't the first time they had been mentioning people and then something happened to them. So I have to be rational enough to say, listen, I've notified law enforcement, I've notified other people, I've done this publicly, but I will not be the front for their scare tactic. I think that's a big scare tactic. The idea that they can mention someone and then something bad happens to that person would make us all be terrified. It's traumatic to begin with, but it would be even more fear-inducing if you can use they used to say that they predict things like it's not numerology, they call it gementia, or where they do things by numbers, and they can figure out what's going to happen to people by that. That would be terrifying as a society for us to live like that, which is part of what I'm saying. They're having their own conversation in the back, but part of what I'm saying is they're not going to use me as a front to scare people, to make people think they're more powerful than they are. What I believe now, and I think I've said this before, is that they are involved in hurting people. It's not that these are random acts. These are acts that if you look at the names of the people who they've hurt, they're young people. They're people who have, for me to have even known them before this, to not mention their name, like if it was someone that I didn't know and I would just like by accident say something, no, I knew these people were famous, or they were, they just said high profile, not high profile, like in when in entertainment, in the entertainment industry. If I knew them from the entertainment industry and I don't know everyone, then that means these are people who are easily recognizable people. So that if I were to say their name, people would say, oh, I know that person. And then if God forbid something happens to them, you would automatically connect it to these people. That isn't for regular people like me or you to do. It's for law enforcement, for professionals to deal with. We don't have the skills and the qualifications, and God forbid these people know, then they're going to react in a certain way. Their families will react in a certain way. It would be too much for regular folks like us to be responsible for. They're not going to make me the front of that. But just going back over that, I'm just going to put in the comments section the Hunger Games clips, the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn clip. I think there is maybe one or two. And I just want you guys to think about this, how irrational it would be for people to out loud claim someone is going to be hurt, sick, or suggest that I look them up and involve them, and then for something bad to happen to them. That isn't irrational.